The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in January, delivered by a woman in a purple pantsuit who looked like she wanted to argue with the weather itself. I watched from my kitchen window as she stepped out of her pristine white SUV, nearly slipped on the icy driveway, caught herself, and then marched up to my mailbox like she owned the place. She didn't knock, just shoved the envelope inside and drove off, leaving tire tracks in the fresh snow. I'm Ethan Holbrook, and I've lived on the northern shore of Lake Millbrook in Wisconsin for 37 years. My grandfather bought this property back in 1952, built a small cabin that I eventually expanded into a proper house, and left it to me when he passed. The lake itself, all 200 acres of it, belongs to me too. Every drop of water, every fish swimming beneath the ice, every inch of shoreline, it's all mine, documented in property records going back decades. The letter was from the Millbrook Shores Homeowners Association. I didn't even know there was a homeowners association until I opened that envelope. The letterhead was fancy, printed on heavy cream-colored paper with a logo that showed a stylized lake and some pine trees. "Dear Mr. Holbrook," it began. "It has come to our attention that you have failed to maintain proper snow removal from the lake surface adjacent to our community. As per Millbrook Shores HOA regulations, all lake surfaces visible from member properties must be cleared of snow within 48 hours of any snowfall exceeding 3 inches. Your current violation includes approximately 1 week of accumulated snowfall. You have 72 hours to comply or face daily fines of $500. I read it 3 times, each time getting more confused and then more angry. They wanted me to shovel my lake, my entire lake. Because snow was blocking their view, the signature at the bottom belonged to Patricia Kensington, HOA president. There was a phone number listed, so I called it immediately. Millbrook Shores HOA, Patricia speaking. Her voice was sharp, clipped, like she was perpetually annoyed. "This is Ethan Holbrook. I just received your letter about snow removal." "Oh, Mr. Holbrook, yes, we've been very patient, but the accumulated snow is becoming an eyesore for our residents. Several have complained. You want me to remove snow from my lake?" "From the portion visible from our properties, yes. It's clearly stated in our community guidelines." "I don't live in your community." There was a pause. "Excuse me. I'm not part of your HOA. I've lived here for 37 years. My grandfather owned this land before that." "I never signed any HOA agreement. Mr. Holbrook, all properties with lake access in the Millbrook Shores development are subject to HOA regulations. That includes lake owners. I'm not in your development. Your development is built on my shoreline." Another pause, longer this time. "That's impossible. The HOA owns the shoreline rights." "No, madam, you don't. I own the entire lake and 300 feet of shoreline all the way around it. I have the deed right here. Want me to fax it to you? This is ridiculous." "I'm looking at our development plans right now, and they clearly show shared shoreline access." "Shared by who? Nobody asked my permission to share anything." Her voice got colder. "Mr. Holbrook, I don't know what kind of scam you're trying to pull, but the Millbrook Shores community was legally established in 2019. We have all the proper documentation. If you don't comply with our snow removal requirements, we will pursue legal action." "Let me make this real clear," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "That lake is mine. Every inch of it. The shoreline where your houses are sitting is mine too, and I'm getting real curious about whether anyone got my permission before they started building there." I hung up before she could respond. The rest of that day, I spent digging through my files. My record keeping isn't the best, but I knew I had the important stuff. The original deed from 1952 when my grandfather bought the property. The updated survey from 1988 when I built the addition on my house. The property tax records showing I'd been paying taxes on the full acreage, including the lake, every single year. What I didn't find was any paperwork about selling, leasing, or granting easements for any shoreline access. Nothing about a housing development. Nothing signed by me allowing anyone to build anything. I called my lawyer the next morning. David Chen had handled my divorce paperwork 8 years ago and had helped me navigate a few other legal issues over the years. He was a straight shooter, which I appreciated. "Ethan, slow down," he said after I'd rushed through my explanation. "Someone built houses on your property without permission. That's what it looks like. On the south side of the lake, I don't go over there much. The whole development just appeared over the past few years. And you're sure you never signed anything? No easements, no access agreements, nothing. Nothing. I'd remember signing away part of my grandfather's land. Okay, I need you to bring me everything you have. All your deeds, surveys, tax records. Also, go to the county assessor's office and get copies of whatever they have on file for those new properties. I want to see what they claim gives them the right to be there." I spent the afternoon at the county offices in downtown Millbrook. The clerk, a young guy named Josh who couldn't have been more than 25, pulled up the records on his computer. "Millbrook Shores Development," he said, clicking through screens. "Okay, here we are. Lots 1 through 24 sold between 2019 and 2023. All single-family homes. Assessed values ranging from $400,000 to $700,000. What about the land? Who sold it?" He clicked some more. "Original sale was from Millbrook Properties LLC to individual buyers. Let me check who owns Millbrook Properties." More clicking. "Looks like it's registered to a Theodore Vance out of Minneapolis. Never heard of him. What about the shoreline access? What gives them rights to the lake?" Josh pulled up another screen. "According to this, the development has deeded access to Lake Millbrook, with shoreline rights extending 50 feet from the water's edge." He looked at me. "Why, is there a problem? I own that lake, the whole thing, and I never gave anyone permission for shoreline access." His eyes widened. "Oh, that's not good. You got paperwork showing I sold or transferred any rights?" He searched for 10 more minutes. "No, sir. According to our records, you still own the full property as described in your 1952 deed and subsequent surveys. But these folks also have deeds that say they own their lots with lake access. Somebody sold them something they didn't own. That's above my pay grade, Mr. Holbrook, but yeah, sounds like it." I took copies of everything and drove straight to David's office. He spent an hour reviewing the documents while I drank bad coffee and stared at the water stains on his ceiling. "This is fraud," he finally said. "Clear-cut fraud. This Vance character, or whoever's behind Millbrook Properties, sold lake access rights they didn't own. Every single one of these homeowners bought property based on false pretenses. What do I do? First, we file a quiet title action to officially establish your ownership of the disputed areas. Second, we send cease and desist letters to the HOA and to every property owner in that development. Third, we probably file a police report because this is criminal fraud on a massive scale. The homeowners, the regular people who bought houses, they didn't do anything wrong though, right?" David nodded. "They're victims too. They paid good money believing they were getting lake access. This is going to be a mess for them. I don't want to hurt innocent people. I understand, but you also can't let them keep using property they don't have rights to. We'll figure something out. But first, we need to establish the facts legally." 2 days later, Patricia Kensington showed up at my door. She wasn't alone. 3 other people stood behind her, 2 men and another woman, all dressed like they were headed to a corporate meeting instead of standing on a snowy porch in rural Wisconsin. "Mr. Holbrook, we need to talk," Patricia said. She was maybe 50, with short blonde hair styled in that severe way that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager." She wore a Canada Goose jacket that probably cost more than my truck payment. "Sure. Talk. May we come in?" I considered it, then decided my lawyer would want me to keep this formal. "Rather not. What do you need?" Her smile was tight and fake. "Mr. Holbrook, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'm Patricia Kensington, HOA president. This is Robert Morrison, our treasurer, Linda Hayes, our secretary, and Tom Bridgewater, our legal counsel." The lawyer stepped forward. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with slicked-back dark hair and a suit that looked expensive. "Mr. Holbrook, I'm going to be direct. We've reviewed your claims, and frankly, they're baseless. The Millbrook Shores community has legal deeds with explicit lake access rights. If you continue making false claims about ownership, we'll have no choice but to pursue legal action for harassment and slander. You reviewed my claims." "I haven't made any formal claims yet," he blinked. "Your phone conversation with Mrs. Kensington. That wasn't a claim, that was me telling her a fact. I own the lake, got the deeds to prove it." Patricia cut in. "Mr. Holbrook, let's be reasonable. Even if there was some confusion about the original property transfers, our residents have been using this lake access for years. They've established prescriptive easements through continuous use. Prescriptive easements take 10 years minimum in Wisconsin," I said. David had filled me in on this. "Your oldest house was built in 2019. That's 6 years ago. Try again." Tom's jaw tightened. "Mr. Holbrook, I don't think you understand what you're up against. Our association has substantial resources. We can tie you up in court for years. The legal fees alone would bankrupt you." "That a threat? It's a reality check. Drop this nonsense about owning our shoreline, comply with HOA regulations for snow removal, and we can all move forward peacefully." I looked at each of them. Patricia with her fake smile and designer jacket. Robert and Linda trying to look intimidating but mostly looking uncomfortable. Tom with his threats and expensive suit. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Excuse me." Patricia's smile vanished. "You're standing on my front porch on my land, threatening me with lawsuits for owning what's legally mine. That's trespassing. Leave now, or I'll call the sheriff." "You can't be serious," Patricia said, her voice rising. "Do you have any idea who we are?" "Robert Morrison owns 3 car dealerships in Milwaukee. I served on the governor's Economic Advisory Council. We're not some people you can just dismiss. Don't care if you're the Queen of England. You're trespassing. Leave." Tom pulled out his phone. "We're documenting this hostility, Mr. Holbrook. It'll be useful in court." I went back inside and called the sheriff's office. Dispatcher said they'd send someone out. I watched from the window as the 4 of them stood on my driveway, probably debating their next move. Patricia was gesturing angrily, her breath making fog clouds in the cold air. Finally, they got in their cars and left just as Deputy Martinez pulled up. I explained the situation to her. She took notes and said she'd file a report about the trespassing. "Sounds like you got yourself a civil dispute brewing," she said. "Keep everything documented. If they show up again and you ask them to leave, call us immediately." The next violation letter arrived 3 days later, this time delivered by certified mail. The HOA was fining me $500 per day for snow removal violations, with accumulated fines now totaling $3,500. They also cited me for unapproved structures on the lake, referring to my ice fishing house, and unauthorized watercraft storage, meaning my boat that I kept on my own dock on my own property. David filed our quiet title action that same day. He also sent certified letters to the HOA and to every single property owner in Millbrook Shores, informing them that the lake access included in their deeds was fraudulently conveyed and that they were using private property without permission. That's when things got crazy. My phone started ringing off the hook. Homeowners from the development panicking about whether they'd been scammed. Some were angry at me, like I'd somehow caused this problem. Others were trying to negotiate, offering to pay me for easements or access rights. A few were just crying, talking about their life savings being tied up in homes that might not be worth anything now. I felt bad for them. I really did. But I also couldn't just give away my grandfather's property because some con artist had sold what wasn't his to sell. The local news got wind of it. A reporter named Jennifer Wu from Channel 8 in Wausau showed up at my door with a camera crew. "Mr. Holbrook, can you comment on the dispute with Millbrook Shores HOA?" I probably should have said no comment, but I was frustrated. "There's no dispute. I own the lake and the shoreline. Have for decades. Some developer defrauded a bunch of people by selling them access to property he didn't own. Now the HOA wants me to pretend I don't own what's mine and follow their rules about snow removal and boat storage. It's insane. The HOA claims you're trying to extort the community by making false ownership claims. The HOA can claim the moon's made of cheese. Doesn't make it true. I've got deeds and tax records and surveys going back 70 years. They've got paperwork from a con artist." That interview aired that night. My phone exploded even more. David called and chewed me out for talking to the press without consulting him first, but admitted I hadn't said anything that would hurt our case. 2 days later, Patricia showed up again, this time with a different lawyer and a sheriff's deputy. Not Deputy Martinez, but an older guy I didn't recognize. "Mr. Holbrook," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We have a court order requiring you to cease interfering with Millbrook Shores residents' legal use of the shoreline and lake access." The deputy handed me papers. I read through them quickly. It was a temporary restraining order, claiming I'd been harassing HOA members and threatening them with violence. "This is garbage," I said. "I never threatened anyone." "You told us to get off your property or you'd call the sheriff," the new lawyer said. His name was Marcus Webb according to his business card. "That's a threat. That's property rights. You were trespassing." "The court disagrees," Marcus said smoothly. "This restraining order requires you to stay at least 500 feet from any Millbrook Shores resident or property. That includes the disputed shoreline. The shoreline's on my property. How can I be banned from my own land? Take it up with the judge. Violation of this order is contempt of court. You could be arrested." They left. I immediately called David, who was furious. "They got an ex parte order," he explained. "That means the judge only heard their side. We'll get a hearing scheduled to challenge it, but for now you need to follow it. Don't go near that shoreline. It's my property, I know, Ethan. But if you violate this order, even if we eventually prove it's bogus, you could end up in jail. Just sit tight. We'll fight this the right way." The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, the HOA ramped up their campaign. They set up a website called StopEthanHolbrook.com with all kinds of lies about how I was trying to steal their property and destroy their community. They organized a petition demanding the county take my lake through eminent domain for public use. They got 300 signatures in 4 days. Patricia started giving interviews to every news outlet that would listen. She painted me as some kind of crazy hermit trying to extort innocent families. She never mentioned the fraud, never mentioned that they'd built on property they didn't own. just kept repeating that I was making false claims and trying to rob people of their homes. I got hate mail. Someone spray-painted "thief" on my mailbox. A brick came through my kitchen window one night with a note that said, "Leave our lake alone." I filed police reports about all of it, but felt like I was drowning. These people had money and connections, and they were burying me in bad publicity while I just tried to protect what was rightfully mine. The hearing finally arrived. It was held in the Millbrook County Courthouse, an old brick building downtown that always smelled like floor polish and old wood. Judge Sarah Hendricks presided. She was in her 60s, with iron-gray hair and a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. Marcus Webb presented the HOA's case first. He brought 3 residents who testified about how I'd harassed and threatened them. One woman, Karen Feldman, actually cried on the stand, talking about how scared she was that I'd come onto her property. "I'm sorry," I whispered to David, "but I've never even met that woman." When David cross-examined her, she admitted she'd never actually spoken to me or even seen me near her property. Her fear was based on what Patricia had told her about me being unstable and dangerous. David presented our evidence next: the deeds, the surveys, the tax records. Proof that I'd owned the entire lake continuously since 1952. Proof that no easements or access rights had ever been legally conveyed to anyone. He also presented evidence that Theodore Vance, the man behind Millbrook Properties LLC, had a criminal record for real estate fraud in 2 other states. Judge Hendricks reviewed everything carefully. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "Mr. Holbrook, you claim to own the entire lake and 300 feet of shoreline around it." "Yes, Your Honor, and I have the documentation to prove it." "And Millbrook Shores residents believe they have legal lake access based on their deeds." "Yes, Your Honor," Marcus said. "And those deeds reference lake access conveyed by Millbrook Properties LLC, owned by Theodore Vance." "Correct." "And Mr. Vance obtained the rights to convey this lake access how exactly?" Marcus shuffled papers. "The original transfer was from the county." "Show me the documentation." He couldn't, because it didn't exist. Judge Hendricks spent another hour asking questions, reviewing documents, and generally making everyone nervous. Finally, she ruled. "This restraining order is dissolved immediately. Mr. Holbrook has presented clear and convincing evidence of ownership." The burden of proof now shifts to the HOA to demonstrate legal authority for their claimed access rights. Until such time as they can provide documentation of legitimate transfer of property rights, Mr. Holbrook's ownership stands. This court will not enforce HOA regulations on property the HOA has no legitimate claim to. Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. Our residents have invested millions of dollars based on legitimate deeds." "Sit down, Mrs. Kensington. Your residents' deeds may be legitimate as to the lots they purchased, but the lake access provisions in those deeds appear to reference property that was never legally available for conveyance. If someone defrauded your residents, I suggest you find them and sue them. But this court will not validate false claims just because people paid money based on those claims." We walked out of the courthouse into a crowd of angry Millbrook Shores residents. They'd been organized by Patricia, who'd sent out a blast email telling everyone to show up and show that bully we won't back down. "Thief!" someone shouted. "You're destroying our property values." Another voice called. A man in his 40s pushed through the crowd. "My family's entire savings is in our house. You can't just take away our lake access." "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I never gave it to you in the first place. Someone sold you something that wasn't theirs to sell. So we're just supposed to lose everything because you want to be greedy." David stepped between us. My client isn't being greedy. He's protecting property that's been in his family for 70 years. If you've been defrauded, you need to pursue the people who defrauded you, not attack the legitimate property owner. Patricia pushed forward. Don't listen to him. Ethan Holbrook is trying to steal our community's most valuable asset. We have rights. We have possession. We've been using that lake for years. 6 years isn't long enough for adverse possession, David said calmly. And you can't claim rights to property through fraud. I saw news cameras in the crowd. Jennifer Wu was there with her crew, filming everything. This was going to be all over the local news again. Let's go, I said to David. We pushed through the crowd to his car. Someone threw a coffee cup that splattered on the windshield. Deputy Martinez appeared and started moving people back, threatening to arrest anyone who didn't disperse. Back at David's office, we reviewed our next steps. We need to find Theodore Vance, he said. If he's the one who perpetrated this fraud, he needs to be held accountable. How do we find him? I've got a private investigator I work with. Let me make some calls. 3 days later, we had answers. Theodore Vance was in federal custody in Minnesota, awaiting trial for wire fraud and money laundering related to a separate real estate scam. He'd apparently made a career out of selling property he didn't own to unsuspecting buyers, then disappearing before anyone caught on. David contacted the FBI agent handling Vance's case, a woman named Sarah Cho. She was very interested in hearing about Millbrook Shores. We've been trying to identify all of Vance's victims, she explained over speakerphone. This fits his pattern perfectly. He finds private property near desirable locations, creates fake transfer documents, sells lots with access to amenities he doesn't own, then moves on before people realize they've been scammed. What happens now? I asked. We add this to the charges against him. We'll need your cooperation as a witness. We'll also need to interview the Millbrook Shores homeowners. They're victims too, unfortunately. Can they get their money back? Probably not all of it. Vance has spent most of the money he's stolen. There might be some recovery through asset forfeiture and restitution, but these folks are likely looking at significant losses. After the call, David leaned back in his chair. This is going to get worse before it gets better. He was right. The FBI investigation made everything more official and more public. Agents interviewed dozens of Millbrook Shores residents. The local news coverage intensified. National news outlets picked up the story. Suddenly, I was the guy on CNN and Fox News, the property owner fighting an HOA over a lake. Most of the coverage was sympathetic to me, framing it as a case of an honest landowner being attacked by entitled rich people who'd been scammed. But some outlets spun it differently, portraying me as an inflexible jerk who could solve everything by just granting easements but refused out of spite. The HOA doubled down. They filed a new lawsuit, this time claiming I'd somehow conspired with Vance to defraud the homeowners. It was completely baseless, and David said it would get thrown out, but it was another legal battle to fight. Patricia organized more protests. Every weekend, 30 or 40 people would gather at the public road nearest my property with signs reading things like "Fair Access Now" and "Stop the Land Grab." They'd chant and wave at passing cars and give interviews to reporters. The psychological pressure was intense. I'd lived peacefully on my lake for decades, bothering nobody, and now I was painted as a villain for defending what was legally mine. David advised me to stay off social media and avoid reading comments on news articles. People are idiots online, he said. Don't let them get in your head. But it was hard. I'd check the Stop Ethan Holbrook website and see people talking about me like I was some kind of monster. They posted photos of their kids playing on my shoreline, captions about how I wanted to destroy their family memories. Petition after petition demanding I be forced to grant access. I tried to stay focused on the facts. I owned the land. I'd done nothing wrong. Justice would prevail. 2 months after the judge dissolved the restraining order, Theodore Vance pleaded guilty to 23 counts of wire fraud and agreed to cooperate with investigators. As part of his plea deal, he provided detailed records of all his schemes, including Millbrook Shores. The records showed exactly what we'd suspected. He'd created fake documents suggesting the county had sold him the lake access rights back in 2018. He'd used those forged documents to establish Millbrook Properties LLC as the developer of record. Then he'd sold lots to individual buyers, each deed including lake access provisions that sounded legitimate but were based on the forged transfers. He'd made approximately $8 million from the Millbrook Shores sales alone. Most of that money was gone, spent on luxury cars, gambling, and setting up his next scam. The FBI agent, Sarah Cho, came to interview me personally. She was thorough and professional, documenting my ownership history and getting my statement about discovering the development. "What happens to the homeowners?" I asked. "That's complicated," she said. "Legally, they bought property based on fraudulent representations. Their deeds are valid for the lots themselves, but the lake access provisions are void because Vance never had the authority to convey those rights. Some of them might have title insurance that covers this, but most won't. They're going to lose a lot of money on this. That's not fair to them. No, it's not. But it's also not your fault, Mr. Holbrook. You're a victim here too. Vance used your property as part of his scam without your knowledge or consent. Patricia and the HOA board tried to paint me as complicit somehow, suggesting I'd known about the development and allowed it to proceed as part of some elaborate scheme. But there was zero evidence of that because it wasn't true. The FBI investigation concluded in late April. Vance was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The victims' fund established as part of his plea deal would provide maybe 20 cents on the dollar for what people had lost. With the criminal case resolved, attention turned back to the civil dispute. The HOA's lawsuit claiming I'd conspired with Vance was dismissed with prejudice, meaning they couldn't refile it. Judge Hendricks called it frivolous and without merit. But that didn't solve the fundamental problem. 24 families owned homes they'd bought believing they had lake access. That access was now proven to be fraudulently conveyed. Their property values had crashed. Several families were underwater on their mortgages. David suggested a mediation. "You could sell them easements," he said. "Not because you have to, but because it might be the right thing to do." How much would that cost them? Market rate for lake access easements in this area. Probably $15,000 to $20,000 per property. You could make $300,000 to $400,000 and solve everyone's problem. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me was still angry at how they'd treated me, the protests and the harassment and the death threats. But another part of me understood they were victims too. They'd been sold a dream by a con artist, and now that dream was falling apart. The mediation was held in early May. All 24 property owners were invited, along with HOA board members, both sides' lawyers, and a professional mediator named Russell Grant. I proposed selling easements for $15,000 per property. The easements would grant permanent lake access for recreational purposes, including dock installation and use, but would not grant any HOA authority over the lake itself. Patricia immediately objected. "That's extortion. You're trying to profit from your fraud, Mrs. Kensington," Russell said patiently. "Mr. Holbrook has been cleared of any wrongdoing. He's under no legal obligation to grant any access at all. This is a voluntary offer." $15,000, a woman I didn't know said. We already paid for lake access when we bought our homes. Now we have to pay again. You paid Theodore Vance, David explained gently. Unfortunately, he sold you something he didn't own. Mr. Holbrook is offering to legitimize that access for a reasonable price. Reasonable, another man said. Do you know what this whole situation has cost us already? Our property values have dropped 40%. Some of us owe more on our mortgages than our houses are worth now, and you want another 15 grand. I understand this is difficult, I said, but I'm trying to help. I could just say no access at all. I could fence off the entire shoreline. Instead, I'm offering a way to give you what you thought you were buying. The mediation lasted 6 hours. People yelled. Some cried. Patricia called me a thief at least a dozen times. Russell had to call for breaks when things got too heated. Finally, Robert Morrison, the HOA treasurer with the car dealerships, spoke up. Look, we're screwed no matter what. Vance screwed us. The FBI can't get our money back. Property values are in the toilet. We can either accept Ethan's offer and at least have legitimate lake access, or we can keep fighting and end up with nothing. I say we take the deal. Others slowly agreed. Not everyone, and not happily, but enough. 19 of the 24 property owners agreed to purchase easements. 5 refused, either because they couldn't afford it or because they were too angry at me to give me any money. Patricia was one of the 5 who refused. I will never pay you a cent, she hissed at me as the mediation ended. This isn't over. The easement sales closed over the next month. I made $285,000, which honestly felt strange. I hadn't wanted any of this. I just wanted to live peacefully on my grandfather's land. The 5 holdouts, including Patricia, found themselves in a difficult position. They couldn't access the lake legally. The other homeowners who'd bought easements had access, but they didn't. Patricia tried to argue that the HOA as an entity should get free access, but David shot that down. The HOA isn't a property owner. It's an organization representing property owners. Each property owner needs their own easement. In June, 3 of the 5 holdouts came back and bought easements. That left just 2 refusing, Patricia and a man named Douglas Werner, who'd been one of the most vocal protesters against me. Douglas eventually moved away, put his house on the market, and sold it at a huge loss to someone who then immediately came to me and bought an easement. Patricia stayed. She lived in her house on what used to be my shoreline, unable to access the lake that was 20 feet from her back door. I'd see her sometimes, standing on her deck, staring out at the water with this look of absolute rage. The HOA essentially collapsed. With the criminal fraud exposed and most homeowners dealing with massive financial losses, nobody wanted to pay dues to an organization that had spent thousands on frivolous lawsuits. Patricia remained president in name, but there were no more meetings, no more activities, no more enforcement of rules. In July, I got a call from Deputy Martinez. Mr. Holbrook, we need you to come down to the station. What's wrong? Just need to talk to you about an incident. Nothing you're in trouble for. At the station, I met with Martinez and Sheriff Tom Davidson. They showed me photos of my boat, which I kept docked at my property. Someone had taken a knife to it, slashing the seats and cutting the fuel lines. When did this happen? I asked. Best we can tell, sometime last night. Your neighbor, Mr. Patterson, saw it this morning and called us. Any idea who did it? Martinez and Davidson exchanged glances. We're reviewing security footage from a couple properties that have cameras. But Mr. Holbrook, have you had any recent conflicts with anyone? You mean besides the entire Millbrook Shores development? Anyone specific? I thought about Patricia's rage at the mediation, the way she still glared at me whenever I saw her. Patricia Kensington hasn't bought an easement. She's still pretty angry. They took my statement and said they'd investigate. I filed an insurance claim for the boat damage, about $8,000 worth of repairs needed. 2 days later, Martinez called me back. We got her on camera, Mr. Holbrook. Patricia Kensington, clear as day, walking down to your dock at 2 in the morning with what looks like a knife in her hand, then walking back 15 minutes later. So what happens now? We're getting a warrant for her arrest. Criminal damage to property. Given the dollar amount, it's a felony. They arrested Patricia the next morning. I wasn't there, but heard about it from multiple sources. She apparently screamed at the deputies that she was being persecuted, that I'd orchestrated the whole thing, that she was the real victim. Her husband, Gregory, called me that afternoon. "Please," he said, "please drop the charges. Patricia's not well. All this stress, the financial losses, it's destroyed her. She had a breakdown. She needs help, not jail." I didn't press charges, I said. The county did. Once there's evidence of a crime, it's out of my hands. She could go to prison. She destroyed my boat. That's a crime. I'm sorry she's struggling, but that doesn't give her the right to vandalize my property. You've already taken everything from us. Our savings, our retirement, our home's value. Isn't that enough? I didn't take anything from you. Theodore Vance did. Patricia keeps blaming me for something I didn't do. He hung up. Patricia's trial was scheduled for September, but her lawyer worked out a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to felony criminal damage to property in exchange for probation, restitution, and mandatory counseling. Part of the plea deal was also a formal restraining order requiring her to stay away from me and my property. She and Gregory moved away a month later. Sold their house, taking a massive loss like everyone else. I heard through the rumor mill that they'd moved to Arizona to live with Gregory's brother. The drama finally seemed to be dying down. Most of the Millbrook Shores residents had accepted the situation. They had their easements, they could use the lake, and life went on. Some were still bitter toward me, but they kept their distance and we didn't have conflicts. The 5 properties that had changed hands since the fraud was exposed all went to buyers who knew the situation and bought easements as part of their closing process. Property values in the development slowly started recovering as the scandal faded from headlines and the legitimate lake access was established. I tried to return to my quiet life, fishing, maintaining my property, enjoying the seasons around the lake, but things had changed. I'd learned that peace isn't guaranteed, that other people's greed and dishonesty could disrupt everything even when you'd done nothing wrong. David suggested I install security cameras around my property, just in case. Most of these folks have moved on, but there might still be someone angry enough to cause trouble. I took his advice, installed cameras covering my driveway, the dock, and the shoreline areas nearest the development. In October, I got a letter from a woman named Helen Foster. She'd been one of the original Millbrook Shores residents, one of the first to buy an easement back during the mediation. "Dear Mr. Holbrook," she wrote, "I wanted to apologize. When all of this first started, I believed Patricia and the others who said you were trying to steal our property. I participated in the protests. I signed petitions against you. I said terrible things about you to my neighbors and on social media. I'm deeply sorry. After the FBI investigation and the trial, after learning what really happened, I realized we'd victimized you just as much as Vance victimized us. You were defending what was rightfully yours and we attacked you for it. I hope you can forgive us, some of us anyway. Thank you for offering the easements and for giving us a path forward. My family loves living on this lake and we're grateful we can still enjoy it." I wrote her back, thanking her for the apology and saying there were no hard feelings. It felt good to have someone acknowledge what I'd been through. More apologies trickled in over the following months. Not from everyone, but from enough people that it helped heal some of the wounds. In December, almost a year after that first ridiculous letter about snow removal, I was sitting in my living room watching the lake freeze over when David called. "Good news," he said. "The quiet title action is finalized. Judge Hendricks issued the final ruling. Your ownership of the lake and shoreline is officially confirmed. All easements are properly recorded and the whole mess is legally resolved. It's really over. It's really over. You won, Ethan. Justice prevailed." After we hung up, I walked out onto my porch despite the cold. The lake stretched out before me, snow-covered and peaceful. The lights from the Millbrook Shores houses twinkled along the far shoreline, families inside living their lives. We'd all been victims of Theodore Vance's greed, all hurt by his fraud in different ways. But we'd found a way through it, not perfect but workable. 23 families had legitimate lake access now. I'd maintained ownership of my grandfather's property. The criminal was in prison where he belonged. I thought about Patricia sometimes, wondered if she'd gotten the help she needed or if she was still consumed by bitterness. I hoped she'd found peace, though I doubted it. The whole experience had taught me things I wished I hadn't needed to learn. That people will believe lies if the lies are more convenient than the truth. That mobs can form quickly when someone's presented as a villain, regardless of facts. That defending what's rightfully yours can make you the bad guy in other people's stories. But it also taught me that documentation matters, that legitimate ownership backed by decades of clear title will eventually prevail over fraud no matter how sophisticated. That most people, when given time and facts, will come around to doing the right thing. That the legal system, despite its flaws and slowness, generally works. I stood on my porch as the sun set, painting the frozen lake in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in Arizona, Patricia was probably still angry at me. Somewhere in Minnesota, Theodore Vance was sitting in a cell. And here in Wisconsin, I was home on my grandfather's land where I belonged. The next morning, I woke up to 3 inches of fresh snow. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen window, and looked out at the pristine white covering the lake. It was beautiful, peaceful, and I didn't shovel 1 inch of it.